Magnum XL-200 is the original hypercoaster, and in my opinion, it is still the best. It was originally built by Aerodynamics in 1989 as a variant of their Mine Train coaster. It was marketed as the first hypercoaster, being the first coaster over 200 feet. But interestingly, the height of the actual ride is under 200 feet, but it is officially taller than 200 feet above the ground thanks to the height of the concrete supports beneath it. The drop on the ride is 194 feet, which interestingly is less than the 200 feet many often associate with the required height for a hypercoaster. The ride opened in 1989 but had several delays that year due to modifications. The ride valleyed in 1989 in the pretzel, which left one train high on the lift hill, one stuck in the pretzel, and one partially out of the station. This is due to how Aero designed old rides with the area between the station and lift acting as a dead zone where technically two trains could be in the lift block at the same time, though the system didn't technically count it that way. This resulted in a wind restriction and the removal of the dead zone. It also resulted in a reprofiling for the 1990 season. The ride would also have upstop pads originally installed underneath the trains to prevent the trains from rising too far off the track. These would be replaced in 1990 with wheels. Due to the track design, the wheels had to be small, as they could not fit under the track otherwise. The ride, originally running with upstop pads, generated quite the spark fest due to the extreme amounts of airtime found on this ride, as the pads would rub up against the underside of the track, creating a lot of wear on the pads themselves, which had to be replaced frequently, as well as on the track. Once the ride did have upstop wheels installed for the 1990 season, the wheels had to be smaller than ideal due to the limited space between the bottom of the track and the cross tie, as this was originally designed for flat pads. This has resulted in the ride having very small upstop wheels that get very hot and need replaced frequently. The ride would have the entrance and exit of the pretzel reprofiled, as well as extra track supports added in the early 1990s in the pretzel due to the increased forces on this section of the ride. When looking at this ride, you'll notice that there's more cross ties and a thicker spine than the rest of the track in the pretzel area. When looking at the pretzel, you can also see the original track layout supports slightly under the current layout of the ride. Originally, it had a steeper drop and pull out into the pretzel. The ride has had track segments replaced over the years and will likely continue to have this done, as the ride is very iconic for the park and will likely stick around for a while. The ride operates with 3 trains, red being train number 1, blue being train number 2, and black being train number 3. The only difference in color is seen in the stripes on the lead car on the trains. Train 1 was replaced with a new train in 2024, and it rides much smoother than the other 2 trains. The ride's current design does not allow it to stack, so if there's a long delay in the station, the third train will set up on the safety brakes by the lift hill. This will be a fast and hard stop, resulting in pain for the riders and extra wear and tear on the trains. For this reason, it does count as a downtime, and ride crews try to avoid this as much as possible. The ride had the safety brake release added to the back panel in the station sometime in the early 2000s. This allows operators to release the safety brakes when a train does stop or set up in those brakes without having to go to the base of the safety brakes like they had to do prior to this switch's installation. The ride has also had several different lift motors over the years, with some claiming that they may have even come from past attractions such as Disaster Transport. The ride got a new control system in 2015 from Consign, the company that usually installs control panels for B&M attractions. The ride features 3 trains with 6 cars and 3 rows each per car, with a total of 36 riders per train. The ride can be quite controversial, with some claiming that it's too rough and others saying it's one of the best rides they've ever been on. This, in my opinion, depends largely on which seat you ride in. Many claim that seat number 3, so car 1, row 3, is the best seat on the train. I have to disagree. While row 3 does provide the most airtime and most extreme airtime of any of the rows, I personally find that riding in the back is a much smoother experience. Particularly row number 16 is very smooth while still having a lot of airtime. If you really don't like roughness, row 17, so in the middle of the back car, is the smoothest row on the train in my opinion, so if you're sensitive to roughness, I would try riding there. But row 16 is a good balance of smoothness and airtime. Row 3 even gives me a headache, and I'm a fanatic for this ride, but I do ride there occasionally, and it is very forceful. The ride typically runs 3 trains on busy days, but it does require an extra operator on the load side of the platform. For this reason, the ride generally runs 2 trains on less busy days. The ride is restricted to only running 1 train when it's raining due to a collision that happened in 2008. In this event, a train was overspeeding and it flew through the safety brakes after a setup occurred. The train cleared the safety brakes and collided with a train in the ready brakes behind the station. After this collision, the ride was restricted, along with all the aero coasters at Cedar Point, to only running 1 train during any type of rain. Due to the ride design, 1 train operation takes a long time to switch to, as the train in the transfer track must be pulled back with a winch onto the slanted section of the track behind the transfer track. This track section is known as the winchback track. Now let's talk about the ride experience itself. You enter the Magnum queue line to the left of the Magnum restrooms. Originally, the entrance was over to the right. The current entrance has a nice large sign marking the ride's entrance. Once you enter the queue line, you'll see a sea of switchbacks which are rarely full. With every single switchback full and the ride running 3 trains, the queue line is only an hour due to the ride's extremely high capacity on 3 trains. Usually though, you'll likely not find it with these switchbacks full, and it will only be the first segment that you have to wait through, if at all. Once you get into the queue line, you'll notice that there are several signs in the queue denoting the ride's history. These used to have facts about the ride, but now have old artwork from the ride's design. It's very interesting and worth looking at if you have the time. You'll meet up with the fast lane merge, which merges just before the stairs going up to the station. You're merged 50-50 with the fast lane line, and if you wish to use the fast lane line, the most you'll ever have to wait is about 5 to 10 minutes. Once you get up the stairs, you enter the large station. The station for the ride is very awkward, as the load side is significantly larger than the unload side, and the unload side lacks a roof. The load side is significantly larger and features speakers in the station that blare, in my opinion, one of the most underrated soundtracks for a ride. The ride got a soundtrack by Zone Tripper in 2019, added as part of the ride's 30th anniversary celebration. The soundtrack can be listened to at the link in the description. This soundtrack is very 80s and is very reminiscent of the ride and its design. It's a perfect fit. Once you get up to the platform, you'll likely be greeted by very excited ride operators making announcements over the PA system. When the ride runs 2 trains, they may not use this system, but when they're running 3, it's an absolute must to ensure the crowd is excited and paying attention so they can board quickly and avoid setups. Once you board the train, you'll be greeted with a simple seatbelt and lap bar. The seatbelts are simple in design and can be adjusted to many different positions. This ride is not very restrictive to larger riders, but if you are concerned, try riding in the front of a car, as you'll have more legroom compared to the middle or back of a car. This is due to how the seats sit so close to each other in each of the trains. Once secured, you'll pull down your lap bar, which is a ratcheting lap bar that can lock in multiple positions. Your restraint will be checked, but there will usually be some room in between ratchets on the lap bar, so it may not sit tight against your body. This is usually better, as the ride can be rough, as mentioned before. Ideally, if you are concerned about roughness, you should let the lap bar sit to whatever position the ride op set it to, and then tighten your seatbelt slightly more so that the seatbelt is the primary restraint device holding you down, and the lap bar is not pushing into your thighs. Once you're dispatched from the station, you'll slowly roll by the turnaround for the ride and down a small dip behind the Backbeat Q restaurant. You'll engage with the lift hill, which takes about 1 minute to ascend. If you're seated in car 2 or car 5, it will be quite loud as you're sitting over an anti-rollback. The other cars will still hear this noise, but you'll still be able to at least hold a conversation. The ride climbs the lift hill, again taking roughly 1 minute. You may notice it slightly speed up or slow down based on where the trains ahead of you are in the ride layout. Once you crest the lift hill, you'll get a fantastic view of the lake in front of you, which at night is pitch black. With the park behind you all lit up, this is quite a stunning view. You'll drop down the 194-foot drop. In the front, you won't get much airtime at all. But once you're in the back, you'll get significantly more airtime as you're whipped over the back of the first drop. If you want an even better experience, I personally recommend staring at the top of the second hill as you drop, as this will disorient your body even more. At the bottom of the drop, you'll be crushed with positive G-forces before ascending the second hill. The second hill serves to set up the rest of the ride, but it doesn't offer that much in terms of forces. You once again get a great view of the lake. If you're sitting in the front of the train, you will get a little bit of airtime going over this hill, but if you're in the back, you really won't get any at all, but you will still get the nice views. After descending down this hill, the train will bank to the left. You'll then enter the ride's first tunnel. You absolutely cruise through this tunnel at extremely high speeds. Usually everyone on the train tends to scream at this moment. It's extremely disorienting and leads into what is, in my opinion, the best element on the ride. The third hill on Magnum provides sustained ejector airtime anywhere on the train. Whether you're in row 3 or somewhere in the back, you'll get airtime all the way over this hill. It's very reminiscent of the best B&M Hypers. You'll descend this hill and get into the pretzel, which is probably the weakest part of the ride. This area provides some positive G-forces, but can be kind of rough. Prior to the entry of the pretzel, you'll experience trim brakes. These brakes may be on or off depending on the wind speeds and the speed of trains. Usually it doesn't make too big of a difference, as trains usually average about the same time when running with trims on or off under usual conditions. The ride's janky pretzel turnaround will be slightly rougher depending on where you're seated and which train you're riding in. Once again, if you ride in a new train like Train 1 in 2024, it's really not half bad. But if you're on a rougher train, especially on a wheel seat, it can be quite rough, especially if you're not prepared for it and are bracing. The exit of the pretzel features probably the worst jerk on the ride, as you're jerked quickly from a bank to the left to flat as the ride descends exiting the pretzel. It can be quite jarring. This moment is also the last chance the ride crew has to dispatch the train in the station to avoid your train from setting up, so it's quite a bad moment on the ride overall. After exiting the pretzel, you'll enter the second tunnel, which includes an airtime hill. This airtime hill is good, but nothing fantastic. I like to compare it to the return hills on El Toro after the first two big hills. They have good airtime, and on any other ride they would be standout moments. But on Magnum, they're just there and they provide a nice little pop of floater airtime. Continuing on, you exit the tunnel and enter another airtime hill. This one also provides decent airtime, but nothing incredible. The valley between this hill and all following hills provide a good kick of positive Gs. As many people are aware, Magnum's hills are kind of triangularly shaped. Many people credit this with the great airtime, but it also provides a nice kick of positive Gs in the valley of each hill. Moving on to hill number 6. This hill is turned to the right with very little banking. It provides a good kick of airtime along with laterals. Be advised that you do get quite close to the supports for the second hill of the ride, providing some nice near misses. Exiting this hill, you set up for the airtime alley. This is many people's favorite part of the ride, but in my opinion, the third hill is slightly better. The 7th airtime hill provides a lot of airtime, very sustained ejector airtime, and some of the strongest ejector airtime in the park. The 8th hill provides more great ejector airtime and positives in the valley before and after the hill. It also provides a great view of the first drop, which just looks incredible from this angle. The 9th hill of the ride immediately following this features the ride's camera, capturing very hilarious views as everyone on the train experiences strong negative G-forces the moment the camera goes off. You'll then enter the final hill, the 10th hill, which is enclosed inside the ride's third tunnel. In 2019, the third tunnel got upgraded with lights and audio, as well as some fog. This was brought back as originally all of the ride's tunnels featured this. The third tunnel light and audio sequence changes and has various different ones that will cycle through. Note that at the exit of this tunnel is the safety brakes. Here you'll either cruise to a nice gradual slowdown and then return to the ride station, or you'll slam to a hard stop. When the ride does set up in the safety brakes and you're riding, it can be quite jarring, especially in the front of the train. In the front of the train, you'll take the full brunt of the slowdown, being thrown forward into the lap bar in front of the train. You definitely want to brace for this when the ride is running 3 trains. In the back of the train, it's not quite as bad, as the rest of the train helps to pad your slowdown, though it can still be quite jarring, and overall, this is not really something you want to experience, but it does happen from time to time. Once you exit the safety brakes, you'll enter a turnaround where you get very close to the ride's initial descent out of the station to the lift hill. When the ride runs 2 trains, there's a decent chance you'll pass by an exiting train from the station, where you'll get to wave to the train there. You can also look to your left at the entrance gate to the park and wave to people coming into the park, as well as the associates at the admissions gate. In my experience, they love to wave at trains passing by. Once you exit the turnaround, you'll enter the ready brakes just before the station. When the ride is running 3 trains, you'll pretty much always wait here for at least a couple seconds. When the ride is running 2 trains, you'll generally roll right in. When in the ready brakes, you'll hear some audio, which is just a generic sci-fi rising sound effect, but it sounds quite cool and fits the theme of the ride nicely. You'll then return to the station, ending the roughly 3-minute ride experience. Overall, my rating of Magnum XL-200 is a perfect 10 out of 10. It is my personal favorite roller coaster. While it's not the best roller coaster I've done, as modern rides do have more thrills, it is still my favorite, and it really is pretty close to perfect. It can be a little rough, but if you know how to ride it in the correct seat, it's really not half bad at all. I have quite a bit of personal connections to this ride, as it is my most ridden coaster of all time by a significant margin. I also had the pleasure of being a team leader of this ride in 2021, where I got to learn a lot of its quirks. I've had many different ride experiences, from riding trains that were running a little bit too fast. Train timings are usually designed to be around 60 seconds from the first drop to the entrance of the safety brakes, and I've been on a few trains that ran as fast as 54 seconds, which doesn't sound like a lot, but the train does significantly fly over the hills in the airtime alley. And I've also ridden this ride with lots of people I care about, and just lots of people in general who may be very excited because this ride is a very social experience. And I've also ridden the ride completely by myself, which is its own experience. Finally, this past year I actually got to ride this ride while I could see the Northern Lights, which has to be one of the coolest roller coaster experiences I've ever had. And while newer hypercoasters are smoother, and I do love B&M hypercoasters, Mako is my number 2 favorite roller coaster. They are smoother, and they are awesome in their own way, but Magnum is still the best for its pure intensity and strong airtime. I hope you enjoyed this review. Let me know what you think of more of these reviews. I'd be happy to do more in the future. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.